Hey everyone, welcome back to the Above Board podcast. You know, on this podcast, we've really taken a journey all over the place in terms of the conversations we have. But the thing about these conversations is it's always about real stuff that we're dealing with. We're trying to learn, we're trying to get better. And yes, we mix in finances to the conversation because, well, A, that's literally what we do for a living. And B, there's not a decision that you make that doesn't have a financial implication. From deciding on what groceries you're going to buy this week to buying your next house or starting a business, all of it has money impact. And we don't shy away from talking about those things. So in spirit of that, Matt and I have been quietly collecting viewer questions that we've been receiving. We thought today we could just rapid fire these questions, do a little bit of a Q&A. Matt, you ready to go?
I'm ready for you, Johnny. Let's do this, bud.
Let's see. Where should I begin? So I've got 8. We'll see how far we make it today. We're going to try to keep the conversation like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So I'm going to give you the first one. I love that I get to ask the questions.
Also jumble the order because I don't want anyone to think this was like really too pre-planned. This is like straight off of our mind. So jumble up the questions. Let's do this.
You want me to go out of order? I like the very first one that we got. It's like a super specific one. It's from a client, actually.
You know what?
Okay. Here we go.
This is why I need to be leading these podcasts.
Okay. More than welcome. We'd love to make that happen.
Go.
Crickets. Okay. I am currently saving 5% of my salary into my 401k. Another $350 per month is going into my savings account. And I'm also doing things like paying down debt, for example, student loan and credit cards. I don't feel like there's a strategy. How do I prioritize what I should be doing? Freaking awesome.
I've always described a retirement plan as trying to hit a target that's 20 miles away with a bow and arrow. At this point in time, and where this question is sort of coming in, at this point in time, you just need to know, are you pointed north, south, east, or west? And you want to make sure you're pointed that arrow in the right direction. And I think where the good part of this question is that savings is actually happening. So 401k is being contributed to through salary deferral. Now, ignore the percentage for a moment. And we have money, non-IRA money, looks like $350 a month or so, is being saved in a non-IRA account. First of all, I love this diversification taking place between a tax advantaged account and a non-taxed advantaged account being the brokerage account. So I would say for whoever asked this question, first of all, you're certainly pointing the arrow in the right direction. Where now you need to refine that is to start to come up with what your ultimate long-term goal is. Listen, if it's to retire at 55 and this person, let's just say, is in their 30s who asked this question, you know what? I don't think you're going to make it on a 5% of 401k and $350 a month. But if it's 65 or 70, maybe that's okay. What I'm sort of getting at is there's an unknown here of what is the long-term goal. And the long-term goal doesn't have to be set in stone. We just need a direction on where it needs to be going. I'd also like to add 2 additional points here. One is that 401k, that 5% or so that you're contributing, is it being matched by your employer by 3 or 4%? And all of a sudden that 5% is really closer to 6 or 7. And the second point for that is, what is our allocation? What are we actually investing this $350 a month in and the salary deferral in your 401k? I think there needs to be a strategy for both of those. So I'd say really that the answer to this is you're on the right track, but is that track going to get you to where your goal needs? And you need to come up with a budget, right? The budget is the ultimate financial planning foundation. How much money's coming in? What are you spending that money on? And remember, we talk about budgets. We talk about variable expenses versus fixed expenses. And so we need to kind of separate those two pieces out. What has to get paid every single month in order to keep the lights on and a roof over your head? And what is the going out and the eating out and the entertainment budget look like? And do we need to tighten up the variable expenses in order to hit those long-term goals? Is kind of where my head is at on that one, John. Do you agree?
Yeah, it was good. It was like a 90-second commercial for our e-course, our web course, yourmoneystory.app.
I never heard of that before.
I think, how I answered this question when I was asked this question was to prioritize. So a lot of what you said with the strategy, like prioritize, like how much is in our emergency bucket? And do we have enough in there? And once we can hit that number, are we optimizing our 401k, for example? Are we getting the full extent of the match? Is there other things out there like an HSA that maybe our employer contributes to? This person was an accumulator. So for those listening, we define an accumulator as someone that's in that wealth build stage. That could be, honestly, that's a vast range. That could be like in your 20s to your 50s, but pre-retirement. So great answer, Matt. Next question, which I'll take if you'd like me to. Do you want to ask it to me, or do you want me to?
Is it on our list here? I feel like I
am going in order. I took this.
Okay, hey John, I got a question here from our audience. Is this the mortgage one?
Yeah,
Yes.
this one came from YouTube, by the way.
Oh, it's a good one. Should I pay off my mortgage early or invest the extra money? Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so my default answer, I like to use math for this one. This is something that Jackie and I have lived by for a very long time. Statistically speaking, they say, or mathematically, if you do an amortization table of this, it typically runs to be fairly close to true. So it's something effective if you take 2 extra payments a year that you put into that mortgage. If you add 2 extra payments per year, that'll take a 30-year note down to approximately a 20-year note with 2 extra payments a year. And so to shave 10 years off the back end of a mortgage, it's a big freaking deal. It's like a third of the time. And so what we do is we add that number up. So what's our principal and interest times 2, and we divide it by 12. And that's the monthly. I do it on a monthly systematic basis. That's the monthly number that I add. And so for me, it's like super digestible. It's easy to do and to aggressively pay it off. Now, I think the spirit of this question is more about what's better for my situation. And I think what most people expect, like an investing, a person with investing mindset to have is like, oh, like invest the money, invest those extra savings that you have because you'll make more in the market than you would on paying down your mortgage. I don't know that that's necessarily true. Maybe, if you financed your mortgage in 2020 when rates were like crazy low and you got a 30-year loan at 2.5%, then like, yeah, maybe that's true. If you financed a mortgage now at 7%, with where rates are today on a 30-year note, that might not be the case. So it kind of leads back to for the first question. It kind of rolls back to the answer that you gave in the first one, which is, have that strategy and then prioritize. I love the idea of that being part of someone's plan, like focusing on like systematically paying off a little bit extra early. But we just want to know that that's like all those other buttons have been optimized, 401ks and HSAs and Roth IRAs and all that stuff. What's your answer?
Yeah, I really like that. And I like how you led this with math. Any financial question that I can apply math to takes like the emotion out of the decision and really sort of applies a fact-based answer. What I really like to talk about when I'm asked this question is most people actually don't even realize how a mortgage works, right? And so I think maybe that needs a little bit of explanation. Why does that happen, John? Why, if you make 2 extra payments, does it dramatically reduce? 2 payments doesn't seem like it's a whole heck of a lot. But when you realize how a mortgage works in those early years of having a mortgage, those mortgage payments are mostly going towards the interest. The bank that's loaned you that money wants their money. They want the interest that is coming off of that loan. And so those first, probably call it 10 to 15 years, if you look at the breakdown, which most people don't, you make your mortgage payment, you go next month.
But if you look at it,
you look at it, it's about 80% of that money is going towards interest. And where John's point really becomes impactful is you realize any dollar amount over your base mortgage payment. So that if you make $1 extra payment, that dollar goes directly to principal. And that principal reduction, when you do that over the course of a year and then you multiply that over 20 years, is a really sizable difference down the road. So I love that. And I love educating people on how mortgages work and how it's all interest heavy up front. And by making those extra payments, those are directed, and you don't really control over this. You can't tell them what to do on this. It's automatic. It's those extra payments are going only to your principal and paying down that principal just so quick, which is incredibly helpful. So I love the answer. That was a good one, John. And I love educating people on how mortgages actually work.
The next one's a good question too, which is going a little bit to the EQ side of money, I suppose. But how do I raise financially responsible kids when they're growing up with more than I've ever had? And I think there's a couple different ways that we can go about this. And that's a hard one, right? Because you don't want to raise entitled children that like you want them to have a good work ethic and have a good head on their shoulders when it comes to money as they get older. Matt and I were working together yesterday
I was just going to bring
out
this
of my
up. Yeah,
house.
Ella.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ella
Yeah.
walks in the house with a wad of $100 in cash.
Yeah,
it was such a cute story. Yeah.
It was 101. So she got for her first communion, grandma gave her $100 check. And so we cash it and she wanted a 100 ones because it looks like a big stack of money, which is cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, Uncle Matt's like, hey, why don't I take that? I'll take that and invest it. I'll turn that into 200. And she was like, no, her answer, which I loved, was I'm going to use this money to start a lemonade stand. And I talked to her about that this morning, by the way, Matt. And I was like, what? So what is that? She's like, well, I'm going to invest it myself, and I'm going to invest it in a lemonade stand. And I love that. I mean, I'm not saying we're doing all the right things, but like when obviously money is a world that we live in and it's what we do. And so when it comes to that stuff, I very much make sure that like my kids are a part of money conversations in our household, not like the budget talks that Jackie and I have yet. They're a little too young, but we go to Target and they want a toy. And I'm like, it's the most expensive place to buy a toy. So like, let's kind of have a sense of that. Or we were at the arcade the other day and Ella's just ripping the, almost like you press a button and you either win tickets or
it's like the roulette wheel of arcades.
It was playing. What's the thing that what's the
wheel of, yeah. You pull
machine,
the lever
like
down.
a slot machine, like a slot machine. She's basically playing that. And Jackie explained to her, she's like, we had, a certain amount on this one card, and she sees Hudson playing games, and she's like, well, he gets to play all these games. And my wife was like, yeah, but he's been playing for 15 minutes and has spent $2. You played for 15 seconds and spent $5. And she was like, oh, like you saw her. So like take that moment and explain that. I'm not saying we do all the right things. There's a lot of good books on this that we recommend, but take that moment and try to explain it to your kids. What do you do, Matt?
Yeah, we're really, if I could say anything that we struggle with as a family, it is that. And it's not, it really is because of how much money has changed since we were young, right? The fact that Ella had like that stack of bills. My sons, they get $5 a week for allowance, right? They need to do their chores. They get paid on it. But I was doing it electronically, right? It's 2025 as we're shooting this podcast, right? So like, I don't really have too much cash in the house. And so I set up bank accounts for the boys. But really what we've really realized is that they don't have a way to check that. Like they're not popping on their phone and pulling up Chase's app to see how much money's in their checking account. So they do these chores. I tell them I'm putting money into their checking account, and it's like this, they can't conceptualize it because they don't physically have it. So then the next thing is, okay, great, Matt, just go get a stack of fives and give it to them. Well, if you ask my 9-year-old where his wallet is right now, he's going to give you a deer in the headlights look. It's in his room someplace. There's a pretty big stack of cash in there from his allowances. Where that is, no one at this moment currently knows. It's in the house, so it's safe. It's just a little too safe because we don't know where it is. And so now we're dealing with where the cash is. So honestly, it really is a big struggle. I have Bryce that has a debit card attached to this like kids bank account through Chase. They have a special type of account, but still like we're telling everyone why credit cards could potentially be bad. And I'm reinforcing that with like, hey buddy, just go swipe that when we're at Target and you want to use some of your own money. Last bit I'll make is that they're not responsible at this age, right? At 9 and 12, they want to spend everything they make. So it really is a struggle at times to say like, you really should save. And he's like, why should I save? Well, for a rainy day, but dad, like the rainy days don't occur right now. Like you and mom step in if something else like comes up. So I really struggle with it. I know there's some really good books on it. It's more of just how we integrate it with our family is where the struggle comes in, and just the changing of times. This isn't the 80s where we have, it's more of a cash-based environment. You know how much you have. It's 2025, where it's all electronic these days. And that is really hard to get our point across at times. So it's an area of struggle for sure.
I've heard you share that story before about like digital versus actual cash. And it's funny because I think most parents deal with that. I would say that the value in actual cash for them at that age is really important because they can see it and count it. My son is younger, he's 5, and he has like a wallet, and he loves, like, when we go to like Disney or whatever, like he gets to spend money on something. He like lost a $20 bill in his room somewhere, and he's like, "Oh well, Dad, no big deal. I'll get another." And I was like, "What? That's a 20? Like, it's not like he lost a dollar." I'm like, "That's a 20." But I realized, even though he knows that the number 20 is higher than the number one, he's looking at these bills, and they're all even that, like, they're shaped the same. So he's looking at that as volume. Like, it's the classic analogy with kids. Like, if you give them $21 bills, they think that that's more than one $20 bill. And you have to teach them that. Just like Ella yesterday came with a $100 in ones, because that felt more tangible and bigger because it was a stack of ones. So I don't know, man. I do think the dollars, like using the actual dollars, is helpful for them. And I've been working more recently with Ella on, like, when you receive money for like working for something, let's say if it's a lemonade stand, like, how much are we gonna, the three buckets of money? You can spend it, you can save it, and you can give it. And we're going to make sure that money's appropriated to all three of those buckets. But how are we gonna do that, and what's that gonna look like? Because that's also funny too, like talking to them about giving, and then so like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, I don't know. That could be like buying something for a friend of yours right now. I'm trying to make it relatable. I'm not like, you're going to give this money to charity, because that's not necessarily like tangible for them yet. But do you do that at all? Do you do like, hey, we're going to divide this out into buckets?
You know what? I think exposure was the answer that you gave a moment ago, was maybe the right. There are so many techniques, right? There is this debit card, there's savings, there is the way to donate. They see us donate. We do donate, like to their school and things like that. We're very active, and not just with our money, but with our time. I think the key to all of it, and especially at age 12 now for Bryce, I can have those conversations of when we do go to a store, or when we go someplace, like, why are we not just buying everything on the shelves? Why is that not happening? And I'm able to sort of rationalize, and he's starting to get it. He gets when mom goes to Target and they want something, she's checking the app first to see why would we not pay the store price, the shelf price? Why are we not waiting a day or two and waiting for Amazon to send it, or looking at a second store? So he's seeing that. I think he's starting to get it. But in terms of charitable, I still think that's quite young to kind of understand why does that need to happen? Where's that money going, and what is it doing? So we're working through that one. That's a toughie.
And not to make it not about money, but with a charitable thing, I do think you brought up a good point of, like, resources look different in like, the resource could be money, or it could be time, or it could be energy. Like, Hudson gives Jackie these, like, we call them love rocks. So she's got a pile of rocks that he finds, like, when he's out and about, like at the playground or whatever, and he gets this rock and he gives it to her as like an expression of gratitude and love. Because to him, like that's, a little kid, like, they don't have a lot to give, right? They don't have money and assets and things yet. But for him, that's a huge gesture of like appreciation of like giving these love rocks. And now we've got them in this like big jar that we keep.
Super cute.
All these different love rocks. And I think that's a good point, that like you could like teach kids like the importance and the value of giving. And giving could be your time and your energy. It could be going to help a family. It could be donating time for your church or your school, like you guys do. It doesn't have to always be monetary based. So I know I kind of trailed off on that one, but that was a good one. All right, we got one more. We have a total of 8 that I logged, and I'm gonna keep. This is perfect actually, because now I'm gonna keep the other 4 for the next one that we do, and that's gonna be a good one, because one of them has to do with 529s versus Trump accounts, the newly established accounts as a result of the big beautiful bill. Is that what it's called? Big beautiful
Yes.
bill, BBB. So, and we should probably just save an entire conversation unpacking that for a podcast as we learn more about it. Just came out, right? So there's, what did you say, 900 some odd pages of that bill. So we're still digesting it and learning. So last question, a little bit of a softball for you, but I think it's one that a lot of people want to understand better, which is, what's better to put money into, a Roth or a traditional IRA? Good luck giving this universal advice. And not getting in trouble.
Here's what you should do. No,
Yeah.
I'm not going to start with that. I think it all goes back to education. So let's start just like we had the mortgage conversation. How does a mortgage work? And that might show you on which direction it goes. What is the difference between the two, right? Let's start with the differences. A traditional IRA uses pre-tax dollars. So think of it this way in the most simplistic form. You're getting a break today by putting money into a traditional IRA or traditional 401k. They both work the same exact way. For your money to grow without any taxes on it during the growth period, that accumulation period. You can buy and sell inside of that IRA account. You can buy equities. You can buy fixed income. You can buy all types of securities inside of there, and you can trade those and have gains inside that account. And then at some point in time,
pause.
Okay, good.
Can I clarify for the technical listeners on what a pre-tax? So that deduction that you're referring to, if you put that in a 401k, that comes out of your payroll, that is withheld from your paycheck, and that lowers your income when you actually file your tax return. But if you put it in a traditional IRA, how that works, right? I'm make sure I'm explaining this right, or like I'm making sense of this, I guess, is you're putting those dollars in, let's say from your bank account, but then you report that to the IRS when you file your taxes, and then they reduce your income by the amount that you put in. Now there's caps on how much you're allowed to put in, and depending on what your income is and that type of thing. But point is, you capture that tax deduction when you file your tax return. It shows up on your tax return. So when people are like, well, what does that mean? You put a pre-tax contribution in. That's what that means. And if it's a traditional IRA, you're probably not feeling it until you file your taxes, but that's what that very functionally looks like. All right.
Yeah, and just to add math to that, if you're making $50,000 a year and you put $7,000 into your IRA or into your 401k, you're taxed on $43,000 for the year. You're not taxed on $50,000. So just to kind of reiterate that point, it's how the math actually works is you're physically taxed on less. But that comes with a very big caveat. And that caveat is, hey, at some point down the road, whether it is at retirement age, which is 59 and a half is as soon as you can kind of touch that money, or 73, which is our new special age, is that money will have to ultimately come out of that account. And that money, when it comes out, is fully taxable. So again, using our same analogy, if in retirement with Social Security and maybe some interest and dividends, you're making $50,000 a year in retirement, and you pull $10,000 now out of your IRA, your taxable income for the year is $60,000 because that 10 gets tacked on top of that number. So you're going to pay. Listen, think of it from the IRS standpoint. They gave you a break early on. They want their tax money on that distribution. And those two ages are 59 and a half, which is as soon as you can touch it, or 73, which is when you're required to start pulling money out of that account per an IRS schedule. So really important numbers and ages to think about when you're talking about a IRA.
Now, a Roth IRA also comes with that, there's different rules on when you take money out, but 59 and a half is on paper technically the earliest, right? And there's exclusions if you have other situations, but we won't go into those. It does not come with that 73-year-old rule, that RMD rule, required minimum distribution. But when you put money into the Roth, you are intentionally putting money in knowing you are not getting a tax deduction today, and then that will grow tax-free, and that when you take that out, it will come out tax-free. So now that we've identified that, what's better?
Which one should you do? Hey, John, no. So I think now it comes back. Now that you understand how they both work, they're actually quite opposite of each other. So the question is, when should you do it? So you must think about it in this way. When do you need a tax break? When you're early on in your early working years, where you're maybe fresh out of school or fresh out of college, you're getting your first job, your income arguably will be the lowest it's ever going to be in your life during those early working years. Do you really need a tax break during that time? I mean, you're probably in the lowest tax bracket. You don't have a ton of deductions, so that's probably the only thing working against you. But you're not making a whole heck of a lot of money on those early years.
Yeah.
Do you need to be putting money and try to get a tax break at that point?
Yeah, I argue against that only in the sense that it really has more to do with your income than your age. But in general, it's a pretty solid statement to suggest that, when you start working, you're making less money. As you grow in your career, you learn and you earn more. And so that's kind of where that rule of thumb comes in, that like when we're earlier on and we're making less money, typically, you'll see folks recommend or suggest like, hey, maybe you should do a Roth IRA because you're already in these like lower earning years. Like, for example, if you're a married couple and you're making $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year with a standard deduction, like you're in the 10% bracket, maybe in the 12% bracket. So your tax bill is not significant. It's not a significant enough burden to go, all right, I guess I could benefit from an IRA deduction. So we typically would see people put money in a Roth. But then conversely, like if you're making, $500,000 a year and you're in that 32-35% bracket, like maybe a traditional makes sense. Now, also the problem there is that you might get phased out depending on where income is. And then that's where we kind of convert things to like 401ks or employer-based plans where you can get a higher contribution limit. An IRA, both Roth and traditional, the contribution limit is $7,000 for the year in 2025. And if you're over the age of 50, it's another $1,000.
Yeah, catch up.
But what about that? For a catch-up contribution. But what about like, and we'll maybe kind of end with this as we're wrapping up. But Matt, like the conversion that where it gets muddy, like that, you're in the 22% bracket, kind of moving through, and then like okay, you establish early on I do Roth, later on I do traditional to get the tax benefit later. So when does that flip point happen?
Oh yeah,
that's a hard subjective call.
Yeah, it really is. It kind of goes back to the retirement plan, and it also goes back to diversification. You want your taxes diversified like you have your investments diversified, which means you do want some in a traditional IRA because you're getting that tax break early on and that money is growing and you're going to have to pull it out at some point. You do want a Roth because you would love to have some money that's growing tax-free. And when you get into retirement, taxes become really tricky. And there's a lot of tax planning in retirement because while your income might be lower, income in retirement is taxed a lot of different ways, whether it's how Social Security is included in your taxable income, or if you're making qualified charitable distributions from your IRA. There's a ton of tax strategy. So when you come to us and you've had, hey, I got a good size Roth and a good size traditional, and I have a good size non-IRA account, for us as planners, we have so many tools now in our tool belt to really make sure that we are minimizing the tax bill during those years in which you really can't afford to have a large tax bill if you're in retirement. You're trying to keep your income and your expenses, you're trying to keep your expenses as low as possible, and taxes are an expense on that. So I love when someone comes to us and they've really utilized all three types of accounts, a traditional, a Roth, and a non-IRA account, or a non-qualified account is what we call them. And you have the ability to pull money from each one of those. And by doing so, you can really, within the rules of the tax law, really keep your tax bill to a minimum at times, or qualify for some benefits through the Affordable Care Act, especially for our early retirees, which is a specialty that we have here at CandorPath, is those 61, 62, 63-year-olds, or even kind of in that 59-year-old who is done a really good job saving through life and wants to retire early. The only way to do so is by having a little bit of, or a lot of money in each one of those three buckets.
I appreciate that you called it tax diversification, because that is something that we, coach our younger clients on too, that are like my age, not so much your age, Matt. Sorry, but I still got a couple more years
I'm
in
old.
my 30s. I got a couple more years in my 30s. But I very much try to educate on the importance of tax diversification, because a lot of people think the absolute rule of like, well, I want only tax-free money in retirement. Well, sure. Like I get why people would think that, but it's pretty important in those peak earning years to get tax deductions. And so there's a line that we have to walk. And I think tax diversification is the perfect example, or the perfect word to explain the importance of, when you retire someday, having all three of those accounts, a non-qual, like after tax investments, Roth IRA investments, and traditional IRA investments, so that you can kind of like blend that tax strategy when you retire. Those are typically the best scenarios we see. And so we try to coach people decades ahead of that decision to be thinking about all three of those things. So well said on that one. I think that's a wrap. What would you say, Matt? I feel like
I have another 30 minutes of thoughts that I would love to talk about. But you know what? For the sake of our audience.
We got to keep our audience's attention and keep them coming back. So we're going to save the next 30-minute one for the 4 questions that we have left. First ever rapid fire finance questions. I feel like it went well. If something that we said today maybe sparked a new question for you, send it our way. Write it in the comments wherever you're viewing this. Add a comment for us. You can DM us. You can email us. And if this format is helpful or useful to you at all, please forward this episode on to one friend. We don't take our audience for granted. We love doing these conversations. So you don't see us running ads and commercials on our show, but we do like the idea of continuing to grow our podcast and growing our audience. So getting conversations like this in the hands of people that need it, that means something to us. So until next time, that's a wrap for us in the Above Board podcast. We'll see you next week.